Hey, welcome everybody to the very first episode of the new series, which will probably be a podcast by now when you're watching this. What the Helvetica?
Join Mike Janda and guests to discuss the things that make creative people say, "What the hell, Vetica?"
I have done so much content that is related to how to do this. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And what I haven't done nearly as much is what are all the stories behind people's entrepreneurial journey? What are my own stories? What are the ups and downs and kind of the behind the scenes stuff? And that's what this series is going to be, What the Helvetica. And our very first guest today is my good friend Cyrus Court, who is the founder of Bookery, which is a creative agency that helps education activists and humanitarian publishers get their message into the world. And they are passionate about some of the topics that we're talking about today. We're going to talk about emotional toll of running a creative business, that mental health side, and how traumatic it can be, and the swings up and downs that doesn't get talked about enough. And I'm kind of an open book on this stuff. I have my own stories and challenges and things that I deal with and medications that I take and the PTSD I've gone through that I want to share. And I know that Cyrus has those things as well. Cyrus, welcome to the very first episode of What the Hell, Vetica.
Thank you.
Happy to have you.
Still the best name.
It's good. Okay, so the impetus on this is that this was one of the names that was possible for 2 Pixels Off, my other new podcast that I do with Brad Hussey. We didn't end up going with this name. And then I started kicking myself a few days later thinking, crap, I really want to use that. And I mentioned it in episode 1 of 2 Pixels Off. And I thought, I don't want somebody else to take it. I really want to use that as a podcast name. And so here we are. But it needed to be a different avenue of content. It didn't need to just be more Mike Janda teaching you step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of stuff. And so you're the perfect guest for this very first episode. And I know that you and I, over the last 5 years, have chatted about some of these topics of mental health and the emotional toll of running a creative business. Actually, it's not just that. It's the emotional toll of being alive in the world in 2024 and beyond. So I think we can go even broader than just being a creative.
Oh yeah, totally. And it all affects everything you do with the business too. There's like nothing that happens in a vacuum emotionally for running the business, living your life, paying your bills, watching everything destroy itself. Yeah,
watching your business try to jump off the cliff and kill itself while you're trying to hold on for dear life.
Desperately,
How did we meet? Tell everybody how we met, because we've had a 5-year, it's been 5 years now, a 5-year friendship. And Cyrus is one of the select few people who have my cell phone number and is on the list of 10 seconds to 1 minute response time when you text me, right? Have you ever had to wait like 3 hours for me to get back to you on a text?
Not unless you're probably sleeping. No.
Unless that. So you're on that select group, but how did we meet in the first place?
Yes, I heard about your book on the future when you guested there with Christo. And I was like, oh, I'm going to buy this book. I need this thing. So I did. And then I found 2 typos. And I emailed you. And I said, hey, guess what? You have misspellings. And I know this is something you could fix. So, hi, don't hate me.
It was so good. But you did. And then that was... You emailed me, and that was the start. And somehow we just clicked right out of the gate. I was like, thanks so much for sending me typos. It was embarrassing to me to have somebody find typos when I had proofed that book so closely. But it's inevitable in any book to find typos. There's still a typo or 2 floating around in Burn Your Portfolio that people could find. Anyway, so we clicked, and we've been chatting ever since. Most of it, those first few years, was through Instagram. And then it became text messaging when you left Instagram. What was your motivation behind leaving Instagram in the first place?
Yeah. So Instagram and actually any of the Facebook suite of things, I just don't always like, I don't like the vibe of them most of the time. I find it emotionally hard to be there. And seeing all the content, it's so easy to doom scroll on Instagram. And there's something about the format that I don't like. I'm not necessarily there or not there forever.
Yeah.
I might go back depending on, what's happening. But I just found it too emotionally draining, and I have other stuff I need to focus on, especially the rebrand for the past 5 years of rebranding. The whole time I've been talking to you, I've been doing
exactly.
Holy cow.
It is. You've rebranded so many times. I do want to talk about that too, and kind of what sparks those rebrands. The emotional toll of Instagram is brutal. I feel it. Like, I post stuff, and probably every 10th post, somebody with some hatery comment chimes in, and it isn't always the intention for them to be a hater, but sometimes they're just so blunt in how they offer up their feedback. Hey, I don't agree with this at all. This seems like, there was one on the post the other day. This seems like the most generic advice ever. Like, you just looked on ChatGPT and gave this advice. And it's that bluntness that is so brutal that happens on any of the social platforms. But I think it's really pretty prevalent on Instagram. And I don't know why Twitter probably too. I don't get on Twitter very much, but I know
Twitter's worse.
Yeah,
Twitter's awful.
Yeah.
I mean X. Oh no, I mean Twitter.
I'm calling it Twitter. Twitter was a better brand. Anyway,
it was.
Twitter was a better brand. So that was kind of the motivation, and then the doom scrolling, and then it's the rosy picture, and this can be a good segue into what we're going to talk about. The rosy picture that everybody paints on Instagram, that everything's so perfect, and their makeup's so perfect, and their background's so perfect, and their advice is so perfect, and everything seems so great, and it's not. It's not all great. Did you see, I know you listen to true crime podcast. Did you listen to the Ruby Frankie podcast? She's the one who was
oh my God.
She had like 8 kids or something, or 6 kids, and her husband, she built an audience on YouTube with millions of followers. And then it was found out that she was abusing her kids and tying them up in the basement, and had gone kind of off this deep end, wasn't feeding them as a punishment for things. And there was all of this stuff that started to come out, and she was on trial. It's a Wondery podcast, but it's a perfect example of people watching that millions of followers, perfect family, and everything's not so perfect in the background.
Yeah.
I think it's that way with everybody. Not that everybody's abusing their kids in the background, but it's not all rosy in the background.
Yeah.
It's not all rosy.
It's easy. It's easy to front that image. Yeah. That must be bigger news for you. I mean, it's big news for me because I follow a few different podcasts specifically about true crime, but also about theological/religious abuse and stuff like that. So that was definitely in there for those. But that's local for you, right? That's not that far away from where you are.
Yeah, it's not, but I don't watch local news, and I don't watch national news. I found out all the information when I was listening to a podcast on the beach in Newport a few weeks ago. I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I found out that, she was in Utah, and not very far from me. That's what I figured. Within 20 minutes of where I live. Ugh. But I didn't know about her or any of that story. Okay, so what is the stuff for you that is in the background that you don't share on your social channels? How about that for a picture? What are the traumas that you deal with, or the stresses, or the reality, because you, from the outset, you have a great business. I know your numbers, and I know how they've grown over the last few years, and your rebrands and your positioning and things. It's all so tight, and your lead funnel is so good. I know where you get your clients. So you get this consistency, and you could look at it based on your numbers and say, okay, I hit record number last year. I'm so proud of hitting not just the record, but my goal revenue. And so things look great. Things look great. What's not so great? And you don't have to go into details, but what's the reality of the emotional side for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the biggest issue is one that's directly connected to the business, which is money and managing it. Mm-hmm. And even though that sounds very, very just doing numbers and making sure you hit numbers, it's a lot. Like if you're late for a bill because someone doesn't pay you and all that kind of stuff, it just snowballs easily emotionally, and then it's harder to work to earn it. And sometimes you make stupid decisions about who to prioritize based on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So even though that's a thing where you can step by step it out to fix it, that doesn't fix the background emotional part of it for things. And usually that is what I'm struggling with. Even though I'm hitting numbers, for some reason I'm not hitting numbers they don't happen at the right time. Everything's always off by like a week or a few days. So that's my biggest issue. Also, I didn't talk about this much because I was just dealing with it, but last year I cleared out my clients. I think I did mention it to you a couple times.
I think so.
But I had been overloaded for almost 10 years on clients, which sounds great, but it's hard to wrangle. So I spent 6 months last year not taking any new clients for months. And then I also didn't get any new clients to fill it back up once I was ready to move. And it's taken me another 6 months to recover from all of that stuff, which is also very emotional. I think one thing that we should talk about is also being like the sole earner in the household. And it's also a business you own. Yeah. So we have those two different facets. And I think both of us share that.
Yeah, I definitely do. Okay, so you unpacked a few things in there, or you opened a few things that we should unpack.
I did. Sorry.
What's the biggest? Have you ever had to eat it? Like the client, you say they could be delayed in payment. What's the biggest amount you've ever had to eat from a client and not ever get paid? I've
been very lucky to only have like 2 clients who were terrible. One of them didn't have anything to do with money. She was just terrible. The other one, she had issues that I could not help. And I should have known this when we talked, because I knew there were red flags and I took it anyway.
Yeah.
Like there are people inside her computer stealing her files and changing the formatting.
Oh.
But I didn't take that. Nice. But by the end of it, I was so emotionally devastated with the project. I just canceled it and sent her stuff and blocked her everywhere. So I didn't get like the entire half. It was well over $1,000, which at the time was a lot for me for any project.
Yeah.
You've had more. You've had a lot more people than I have.
I've had a handful of give the money back experiences. I know I shared one of them in Burn Your Portfolio, but it was like $54,000 that I gave the client back. And it wasn't for work that we had done. It was work that they had paid monthly over a span of 6 months, but then ended up changing the project so much that we could not continue. And so it was just returning them that money. But it still stung, because for me mentally, I was already spending that money on employing my people and running it through payroll. So technically it wasn't my money yet, but I was in possession of it. We just hadn't fulfilled the work that it represented. This is why I'm so passionate about the thing that I share about. Don't let your billings get too out of whack with what you've completed with the client. If you've done $10,000 worth of work and the client's only paid you $2,000, you're in trouble. And if the client has paid you $10,000 and you've only done $2,000 worth of work, you're also in trouble. I'm such a big fan of trying to keep the balance of that so that you don't get yourself in trouble where you're having to give money back to a client or having to tell the client, I can't keep going until you pay me X to get us rebalanced on the work that we've done so far. I'm pretty passionate about that topic. But so my biggest eats, going back to that question that I asked you, my biggest eats, one was 17 grand for a client that went bankrupt, and we just lost complete control over hearing from them. And we filed with collections on that one and stuff. It was 50-50 billing, and I got screwed on it. It was a $34,000 website, and they had paid 17 at the start, and we were going to pay 17 at the end, and we finished, and then they were nowhere to be found. That one sucked. And then I had a little logo. This client, it was like $1,500, which for freelancers is an okay sized logo project. For my agency, it was like the toilet paper budget. And that one, the client was miserable enough. And my right-hand guy, literally, we wrote a check and he drove it to the dude's house and stood on his front step and said, here's your money, man, we're done. So those were my two only big eats.
Jeez.
Other than waiving invoices, which I've done before too. I waived invoices, like you said. Don't pay me. Here's your files. Go away, which is good. When do you hit that level, Cyrus? When do you hit how do you know when you're at I would rather not get paid and you get out of my life phase?
When they start breaking boundaries for time. The first person who I didn't give any money back to, she was just bad. She called my parents when I told her I was taking a weekend off. She found my name online, and then she got my phone number from the website, but it was my parents. And it just my mom called me, and I could tell that she thought something serious was happening. And it's like, Mom, this job is for $250. Nothing serious is happening.
Yeah.
Wow. So, but that's a big boundary, right? You don't call people at their number that you found at some random site, especially not at their parents' house.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the one that I lost half of the project on, she started calling me at 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. over and over. One morning I woke up to 50 calls.
No way.
I do have to admit that I was not being as responsive because earlier in the project, she was so demanding and she really wanted me to work 15 hours a day only on her stuff and to be available constantly. And these are boundaries that just can't, it's not sustainable to keep those broken. Maybe every once in a while for one bad project, but this was a normal project going normally. So that is usually my turning point. What is yours? What makes you be like, no, I just can't do this anymore?
It's when the amount of money I don't care about how much it is. I want that person out of my life more. And that can be a wide variety, like $250. If you call me at 5:01 p.m., I'm going to give you your $250 back and move on. Something that level, it's like the amount of revenue isn't nearly big enough for any kind of leniency in you being a good client or not. But if that client was paying you $50,000 and they were texting you at 3 a.m, would you reply to their text?
No, because I have do not disturb turned on. That's a good question, though. But what I usually do is stuff like that with my bigger clients who sometimes break boundaries is that really I just reinforce them. And because for some reason, the higher ticket they are, they're usually more respectful. Thank you. They're usually more respectful of boundaries. They just had a moment where they were like, holy crap. Also, in the beginning of the engagement, I set up my boundaries. I work from this time to this time. I don't work on weekends. If I do answer you on a weekend, it's an exception. It's not a rule, and we're not going to start doing it.
Yeah.
And we need to set up calls in advance. I'm not just going to pick up the phone because your phone number flashed up on my screen.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that how agencies function? Because you're managing so many people.
Gosh, you know what? The bigger you are, the more people just abide by business hours. It's crazy.
Yeah.
When you're a freelancer, solo freelancer, small agency, people think that they can call you anytime, work you on a Saturday, that you're going to be there for them. But when you're an agency with 20 employees, 50 employees, 70 employees, the amount of people who expect you to do that is so much less. And the amount of pressure that clients put on you for those expectations is less. So we never really had to battle it when the agency got bigger. We would feel our own internal deadline. Like it wasn't uncommon to have people working late at my agency. I hated it when it happened. But it wasn't uncommon because you have a deadline from Disney or something and it has to get done by Friday and it's Wednesday and you're only 20% done with the thing and you know you don't have enough time left. People would stay late, but it wasn't because the client was trying to manage your time. The client accepted,
right.
Because you were an agency, the client accepts that you can manage your own time. They don't try and police you like that. So it changes a little bit when you get a little bigger.
And suddenly people are more respectful of that too. So it's the higher price point and the word agency. And they don't always need to know that I'm alone. I don't announce that it's just me for now.
Yeah.
Probably one day I'd prefer it not to be just me. But for now it is. But they don't need to know that. But there's a distinct difference between that and I'm also on a freelancer platform. What's a big one? They changed their name and now I can't remember what it is.
Of freelancer platform, Upwork?
Yeah. Upwork, thank you. It's like Upwork, but you're not specifically for my industry.
Yeah.
But those people do treat me differently there because there I'm just a freelancer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you put turnaround times? I've seen that on Upwork where people say, okay, buy this service from me and we'll turn it around in 24 hours. We'll turn it around in 48 hours. Do you have to do that in a platform like the one you use?
Not the one I do. The one I do is very big on how curated they are. So there's a lot of freedom for the freelancers. And they're really the ones in charge of the project. It's not the clients. That's kind of how it positions itself to the authors.
Yeah.
So I don't have that issue there. I have my own turnaround time estimates, but that's just like normal business.
Yeah.
How long did you usually give? Like if you had a brand project where you were doing their whole brand plus a website, how long did that usually go? And then what were your stress levels by the time you got to the end of that?
Well, the stress level is always proportional to the amount that they're paying you. So the bigger the project, and it's sometimes inversely proportional. So like if you have a big project with low pay, it's high stress. Big project, not enough money. I feel the anxiety of that right out of the gate. I mentioned this in a piece of content. I think it was on one of the podcasts or something, but it's to your client's best interest to spend more on projects because if they're cheap, then you don't feel like you can spend the time and effort and energy on their project. Totally. And then they're not going to get the results that they want. So there's a kind of this inverse proportional thing if the client's not paying enough. I guess it could be stressful too. And it probably was if the client was paying a lot in relation to what you're delivering, then all of a sudden the stress you feel is, oh crap, they're spending so much money on this. It's got to deliver. It's got to be great. It's got to generate the ROI. It's got to be perfect. We got to hit all the deadlines. We can't have a typo because they're spending so much on this. So I think when things are unbalanced in finances, you run a risk of having stress related to it. So I like trying to keep things a little more balanced. I think one of your questions there was, how long does it take? Like a brand identity project at my agency, we'd probably do if it was like a small brand logo design type of project, 2 to 4 weeks for getting through all of the phases and steps of that. Websites were 4 weeks to 6 months, depending on the size of the website and how many pages and how much wireframing
Yeah.
and how much prototyping and comps and all these steps that went into it. But most of those, even our biggest project ever, was like 6 months until it launched. It was $500,000, and I loved the revenue of that.
Wow.
But we felt freaking stress of that thing because it was so much
I bet.
money. It was so much money getting spent, and you're just like, oh, we got to make this perfect in every way.
Have you ever had a big project where you deliver, like you were like, yes, this is the best thing we've ever done, and you delivered it, and the client's like, I just don't feel like this was worth the money?
So, not to that. What one client at the agency I sold to, we had one client who we had that kind of backlash on them. But usually
Yeah.
with a client and with my processes, we're so step by step that if they're disappointed, we're going to know it way early on. It's never with the launched website that we've completed that they're like, you know what, I changed my mind on all the other 20 deliverables that we approved. We changed our mind. We don't like it now. That's kind of rare. But let me tell you a story
That's
about
good.
that $500,000 project. That one, when we launched, they sent an email blast to 300,000 people, and it crashed the server. And it was like server not found error. So this email goes out to 300,000 people, and they click the links in the email blast, and then nothing is there. And I was in New York at the time. This is a PTSD moment for me, but I was in New York at the time, and the client was in New York. And we were at Rockefeller, 30 Rock. We were doing work for NBC at the time, and we had meetings in 30 Rock. And after our meeting in there, the server crashed, the email went out, and then it was like the whole world went on fire around me. And I probably was like so on the brink of having nervous breakdown. I remember sitting in the halls in the basement of 30 Rock, in one of the basement floors of 30 Rock, and we were just found this open corridor, and we were just sitting there. There were 3 of us from my team that were there, just waiting for our devs at our office to get it fixed and get it back online. And it took hours, and I couldn't do anything. I felt so powerless. I was just playing Ski Safari on my phone. You ever play Ski Safari?
No.
I was so addicted to it during that moment because I was just needed brainless activity because I was about to have this just massive nervous breakdown. We met with the client the next day in Manhattan, and they brought the boss of the boss, and we had gotten it back up, but they brought the boss of the boss and then 2 other people to the meeting, and my 2 people didn't say anything. They were with me. It was one of our sales reps. She didn't say anything. And then my right-hand person, and he barely said anything in the meeting either. I sat down with the client and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. This never happens. We couldn't have known it was going to happen until we transferred it to the live server. It's just one of those things. Our people worked. They got it back up in a few hours, and I apologize. And I just put my tail between my legs and opened with that, just kind of self-flogging my agency a bit. And they were okay. They were like, oh, and I said, we've been working together for 6 months. Everything's gone so well until now. This was just a very poorly timed mishap. And they agreed. They understood. But I felt like
That's good.
I just still feel sick. Still feel sick about it now. And this was like 2011 or 12, something like 2012, I think. So it's been 12 years, and I still feel it all as if it happened yesterday. Just that sick feeling inside. It still gives me PTSD. I was talking to my neighbor yesterday. Sorry to go on another story, but my neighbor works for Jacuzzi. He's a high-level operations person there, and they just rolled out this big new POS system and all this stuff relating to that for all of their distributors all over the world and stuff. And they launched and had a few hiccups in it. And when he was telling me about it, I just got that cold sweat, sick feeling inside because I know what it's like
Yes.
to click launch and then have it blow up.
Just, completely bottom out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your biggest fail moment for you?
Boy, I have one. And usually I can bring it up instantly, but for right now, I've totally lost it. Oh, I know what this was. So this was an issue in communication, and this was my fault because I should have said something. I had a client, and she was very nice. We worked together really well, but part of what I offer is book management and publishing management after we're done with the project, where I put all the files up, I put in the description, figure out keywords, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But part of it is that I have to log into their stuff, which is hard to do because, of course, and they should, but websites like Amazon have all their checks to make sure it's you. So I don't want to do it frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I need to do it as infrequently as possible. So this one woman, I was checking her stuff. Secondarily, I was going to the store and I was seeing, okay, the paperback's up, the hardcover's up, the ebook's up, everything looks good. Like literally 6 months later, she emails me and she's super angry because it turns out that the KDP version, which is one of the distributors, connected directly to Amazon, they never published the book through them. The one that was showing up in the store was from another distributor. And even though those two things are there to kind of catch each other, so in case something does happen, it's fixable. She personally was just extremely upset that I was not logging in frequently and checking to see if the Amazon one went through. And it's my fault because I should have explained why I don't do that to her so that she would know to go in and check. But that's literally the only time where I've ever had a client be like, you need to apologize to me and not make any excuses or reasons as to why this happened. And that was ridiculously embarrassing, first of all.
Yeah.
I did, but it was hard because I felt like that was something that could have been, like, first of all, I had the failsafe, which was the other distributor. So, like, I had something up for this, but for her personally, it just wasn't enough. And I understand that. But I had no idea she wasn't even logging into her stuff. She just assumed because she paid me to upload things that was it. And she doesn't even have to look at it.
Yeah.
Ever. Which is weird to me because it was also like, don't you need to check your reporting? Don't you go in and see if you've made sales and stuff? But
yeah, well, in Amazon, I get my emails all the time for my books on Amazon. That Amazon Central is like emailing me saying your report is here and here's your revenue deposit report, and it emails me every month, that kind of thing. But we can say that, but that's why she hired you, was to manage that thing and to help her know what she doesn't know. Yeah. And so I can definitely see.
And I just didn't communicate what I can't do because I'm not in her email, right? And I can't go into her account frequently. It's just not even like ethically correct to do.
Well, and if
but
she's
it's
not
my fault. I
paying you,
didn't say anything.
And if she's not paying you a ongoing maintenance fee or management fee to manage these books and the reporting and all the stuff over time, then it's not included in your engagement. So ongoing book management or ongoing publishing management, not included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know. And I just, whatever. It's a communication thing. I don't think it was my fault, but it wasn't her fault. So it was easier just to apologize painfully than it was to try and argue with her about it. Because I don't find arguing to be successful ever.
No.
But like twice I've tried to do it.
No. It's never successful. And the thing I learned about it was from a parenting book. And we went to a parenting seminar thing one time, my wife and I, about parenting kids, which is a whole nother adventure. But it was the statement, this always sticks with me: you can't argue with a drunk. And sometimes, like, a child is in a tantrum and they're drunk on rage, or they're drunk on a disappointment, or they're drunk on something, but mentally they're not all put together. And that's way a client who is angry about something, they're drunk on anger and they're drunk on frustration and they're drunk on whatever, and they're not thinking clearly, and it's not going to be effective for you to argue with a drunk when they're drunk that way in their brain. So it's best to let it cool. Let it settle. Yeah. Let it settle. Have the conversation tomorrow and not today. That's the advice.
Yeah. Yeah, though this isn't for everybody. For me, it's hard to let things settle. If there's a problem, I need to do it right now. And I will just think about it. Like, I will focus on it for like 24 hours until I do it. So for me, I need to do it fast. But that's not everybody. Yeah. That's a personal quirk.
But you can fix it fast, but not argue with the client.
I will try and attend to it instantly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's how I do it too. It's like, you can fix it instantly, but not have the argument conversation about why it happened and what happened and it's your fault. No, it's your fault, and that kind of thing. And you should have been checking your own reporting. That you could have said to her, I'm not managing your book. You're publishing. You're not paying me every month to manage your reporting and check and make sure all your stuff is live. That's your job. That conversation's not going to go anywhere. But going in and
it's really not.
Sending a methodical email back saying, I just checked. You're right. It wasn't published. It is now. I apologize for that. I'd love to have a conversation with you tomorrow. Do you have time in the morning or something like that to just iron out whatever else we have to iron out? You can kick it down the road a little to give them time after it's solved to settle their emotions.
Yeah. I think that's the best. And that's part of the challenge too with this, is that you have to manage more than your emotions. You have to manage everybody you're working with to a point, because you're going to feel things and they're going to feel things. If you have employees, they're feeling things. So you're fielding all of these different personalities all at once.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you have stories about that.
I do have a lot of stories about that. Those will all come out over time in this podcast. Let me ask you this question. This is the emotional toll of running a creative business. Without the details of the stories and things, how do you feel your overall emotional health has been affected from running or being in this industry in general? Just being a designer, creative, marketer, how is your overall mental health affected by that?
That's a good question. This is going to be a little bit complicated because I am autistic and I have ADHD. So both of those things severely affect my ability to be able to be hired outside of my own structure, which means that to a point, I know I am much more healthy emotionally in this because I can control certain factors that would affect me otherwise. And like to the point where I can't even function. If I was working outside the house. So to that point, it's really good. But because I can control everything, every time I make a really bad decision, either on accident or on purpose, it affects me. And then I have to live with it. And because I'm not particularly hireable in other contexts, I don't have a choice. I have to do this, and this has to work. So I don't personally have any fallback. And I also know that that's not everybody out there. Because a lot of people can and do stop running their own business because they're tired of it and go get a normal job in the same field and they're okay. But I don't have that option. And I know that's different for you technically, because you did work for big names for a while.
Yeah. So I think so it's interesting because while I was building my agency, I was so gung-ho and so busy every single day that I didn't ever stop to pay attention to whether my mental health or emotional health was good or bad. I just had way too much to do. So it was like, just stuff that down, and just keep grinding. I did hit a wall in 2014 where I had the perfect storm of bad clients, a couple of big employee challenges, and my own just emotional burnout from the 13 years of grinding out this agency, I hit that wall, which is what led me to selling my agency in 2015. I just got to the point where I was like, I cannot do this way anymore. I have to change something. And my thoughts were I was either going to scale back the agency size and hyper niche on something, $20,000 websites or $15,000 websites or something, or even $5,000 websites, just brochure site, crank out brochure sites for clients with a super structured process. I was thinking that. I was thinking I could just go back to just freelancing with me and a couple sidekicks, and we have a little 3-person agency. I could merge with somebody. I could sell my agency. I kind of got to that point, but I could not emotionally handle continuing to do it the way that I was doing. I reached out to the agency that I sold to and told them, they had wanted to merge with me a few years earlier, and I told them, hey, I'm thinking of making a big change here. I'm not sure what it is, but I'd be open to merging. I'd be open to selling. I'd be open to, I may downsize it or whatever. And I got my reply back from their CEO. They had 60 employees, so they were a big agency. And he said, don't downsize it. Let me get back to you. And they came back and said that they wanted to, they said they wanted to purchase it. And so we started due diligence and went down that process. Yeah, we went down that process and it was great. But I did feel a big difference after I had merged in with them, after I had put my team from my studio into their studio. All of a sudden, I didn't feel the weight of the entire agency anymore. I was like, I felt that the liberation of, oh my gosh, payroll's coming and I'm not looking at the bank account to see how much money is in there to cover it. Do you have any questions about that before I continue on to what led me to going to therapy and getting on medication and PTSD? Because I'm going to go to this next phase of this story, if you don't mind.
I really want to move right into that. But it almost sounds like that ending part was like the best of both worlds.
I loved that ending part because it was like the cherry on top of building my agency. I had built it. We had built a lot of money. We had great clients. I had a cool studio. The only experience that I hadn't had yet as an agency owner was selling. That completion moment, the exit. I had never had that. And so getting that, I was like super elated that I got to have the full gamut of basement freelancer to building an agency to selling the agency. I had that full spectrum of experience, which I love that in my career story. But after I sold, I started to realize that I was still stressed out. Like I would see I remember seeing the name of one of the clients that was a miserable client for me, and their last name was the street sign when I was on a trip somewhere or something, and I got this wave of PTSD just seeing their last name being the name of blank avenue. I was like, whoa, why am I feeling so much emotion when I just see a street sign with their last name on it?
Goodness.
And so I started to feel that kind of stuff that I had never let myself feel before. And I had a meeting with my financial advisor, and I was telling him, he knew I was selling my agency because I consulted with him before I did it and stuff. But he was asking, hey, how's all that going? How are you doing? And stuff. And I said, man, I'm a mess. Like I told him that experience of the street sign and kind of this PTSD, like I was feeling this anxiety all the time. And he said, well, I got a guy that helped me through some stuff. If you ever want somebody to talk to, I could give you his number. And I was like, oh, okay, good. Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll let you know. So I left that meeting with my financial advisor. I got in my car, and then I was talking to my wife on the phone, and I was like, hey, my financial advisor just said he went to therapy with a guy, and he said if I ever needed him, I could get his number or whatever. So that was interesting. I said that to my wife, and she was like, well, did you get the guy's number? This is what she said. She was like, yeah, go get therapy, man. You got a problem. You got a problem. Go get therapy. So So I called him back. I called my advisor back, and I was like, "Hey, man, you got that number?" And I started meeting with the guy, just talking. And I was surprised at how much baggage I was carrying around when I actually started talking about it. It was all the stuff that I just never let myself feel I was carrying around for so many years, and I still feel it now. And it's challenging to raise kids, and so we've had compounding challenges of just owning a business and raising kids and things. But I take depression medication now. I've been on it for the last few years. I have to take Ambien to go to sleep, to turn off my brain from just the psycho thinking all the time that happens as an entrepreneur. I'm on the stuff. And I used to just be able to manage life just by, go to the gym and exercise and eat healthy and be active. And I used to be able to do it that way, but I can't anymore. It's like, it's too much stuff I'm carrying. I'm still going to therapy now, once a week.
Yeah.
And
well, I think there's a common thing with psychologically, with putting it down, because then it compounds so hard and you don't notice it, and then it hits you all at once, which is pretty much exactly what you're saying. But I think that's really common, because while it's sitting in there, like, your subconscious is still being affected by it.
Yeah.
So you had that experience just from that name, because subconsciously you were still in whatever that bad experience was.
Yeah.
And then it was suddenly like, holy crap, I cannot do this anymore. I'm done.
Yeah.
And then you saw a therapist and got meds.
I did. And I'm still on meds, and I'm still seeing a therapist now. Now, I was thinking, because I wanted to share that part of what I'm doing now and how I'm handling stuff now. But I was thinking on whether it was worth it or not. Was it worth, because if my mental health took a toll running a creative business, was it worth creating the business in the first place? And I would assume that people are thinking, gosh, I don't want to end up being on meds and seeing a therapist because I built this business and it was so stressful and traumatic that I had to go to therapy. So I was thinking, was it worth it? And is it worth it for you, Cyrus? Is it worth it for you to be in this industry and be an entrepreneur?
Yes, because in the economic system we live in, I don't have a choice. I have to be able to make money somehow. Yeah. And I am the only earner. I'm the only person in my household who can earn money and do it with relatively healthy, outcomes.
Yeah.
But my biggest issue, like, if I'm thinking about my most emotionally traumatic thing, and this is again about money, because obviously that's a theme in my life, is making sure I have enough money. But I undersold my services by 90% of what I'm doing now for 6 years. So I let myself be literally in poverty up through the lower classes in terms of income for it's too long, way too long, to the point to where I was working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year, except like Christmas and birthdays. So it's like 360 days a year. And that was totally devastating for me. And that wasn't worth it. But that was also something I could have controlled 5 years earlier by just raising my prices and not being such a weirdo about, feeling like I was overcharging people for something I felt that they could do themselves. Because I'm self-taught for what I do. Yeah. So I always had this thing in the back of my head where it's like, if I can do this, they can do this. And why are they even charging me money? And it took me a really long time to get over that and be like, oh, they're paying me because they don't want to. And also, I have way more knowledge and practice than I give myself credit for. But God, that took 6 years of me almost putting myself in the hospital over it because it was so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been improving since then.
So there's a relation between, I like that you brought up money, because there's a relation between the money and whether it's worth the mental health toll. And when you're living in poverty because you're charging impoverished prices to your clients, it's not worth the stress. It is not worth the stress if you are not making sufficient money just to cover your expenses of a modest lifestyle. If you're not doing that, then go get a job somewhere else, and have less stress. For me, and going back to this, was it worth it for me? And the answer is yes, because there's no way that I could have made the money that I did had I not gone through those experiences and built the agency. I did, in some ways, trade my own mental health for revenue, and maybe that's like the most capitalistic nation statement in the history of the world, but there's some reality to it that's what I did. And I was able to rectify that somewhat now, because my life, in comparison to what it was from a stress standpoint, isn't even close. I love my life. I love what I do for a career. That's the part that I love about my life. We're still raising kids, and there's still challenges there and things that I won't go into here. But everybody who's raising a child in the world, more power to you, because it's not easy to do that. So there's that component of trauma that comes with any parenting situation. But when you compound that with being an entrepreneur and striving to be a successful entrepreneur, it really can get overwhelming for people.
Yeah, it can. And that I don't know if it's harder to establish a business now than it was when I started, which is 10 years ago this year. But I feel like it is in a lot of ways, because a lot of the stuff, and I think you found this too, which happens with everything, but the internet makes things so fast. And like, my example with you is that you were doing the what are those called? The sliding things on Instagram.
Carousels.
Like you were one of the first people. Carousel, thank you. Sorry.
Carousel.
But you were doing the carousels first, and it got so popular. Like, LinkedIn is still catching up on carousels. People are still doing that over on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But anyway, then it got to everyone doing it extremely quickly within like 2 years, and suddenly it stopped being so effective. And I feel like current people, that probably affects everything that they're doing for business. Like, they learn about something from a video a year ago, and that thing's already way outdated. Yeah. So what are they going to do? But you work with more people who are starting, so maybe you see something different going on.
Yeah. No, I do think it's easier to start a business now than it was. And I think it's post-COVID that we got so comfortable in the world working remotely. We're on a call right now. You're in Iowa. I'm in Utah. Yeah. We're talking real time as if we're at lunch. I can have that same type of conversation with somebody in Africa or India or wherever, anywhere in the world right now, immediate. And the world in general is so comfortable with that type of business relationship. I think it's much easier today for people to build a virtual relationship that is nearly as strong as a face-to-face, human-to-human contact relationship. And you and I have that. We've been messaging and texting for 5 years, and we've had plenty of calls too, and talked about some deep stuff. Like, there's no hiding realities in our relationship. And so we have that comfort level, but it's all been virtual. It's all been created virtual. Yeah. And I think that people can build an effective business now and create the kinds of relationships you need to have with a client, even though you're not living down the street from them or working down the street from them.
Yeah, that's true. And for me, like, people like me who have an issue with just overwhelm when there's too much in-person stuff going on, I needed that. I needed to have this kind of thing. So, I mean, for that, it's true. So yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. Also, you were mentioning, this is an aside, I'm sorry. Early you mentioned, is it worth it to have so much trauma that you get on the meds and need a therapist by the end of it? Yeah. And I'm like, for the new demographic, they already have that. They're already there. Don't worry about that. Meds. Yeah. Okay. They already have a therapist. It's fine.
Let's talk about, that's a great segue to, I pulled up some data about the amount of people who are on antidepressants in the United States. This is from the CDC study, and this is a little bit dated. It's 2020, so this is pre-pandemic, but I have some post-pandemic news as well. So this one, in 2018, what percentage of adults were on depression medication? What do you think that number is? I like to quiz people.
36%.
Whoa, that's high. It's actually 13.2%.
Oh, okay.
Now that's between 2018. So this is pre-pandemic. I don't have the post-pandemic news here, or at least I didn't pull it out, but I did look. Well, actually, this might be mental health in the pandemic, what U.S. surveys have found. Let me find a data point in here. High distress. Young adults are especially likely to have experienced outbreak. 58%. Okay. Young adults are especially likely to have faced high levels of psychological distress since the COVID-19 outbreak began.
Yeah.
58% of Americans ages 18 to 29 fall into this category of high level of psychological distress. So 58%. Now, when you compound that with being a designer or a creative entrepreneur, what percentage of creative entrepreneurs say that they are experiencing mental health challenges being in their business, burnout level mental health struggle? What percentage
do you want to hear another high number?
Yeah, I do want to hear another high number.
I'm going to say something like 68%.
75% of creatives.
I almost
polled,
said 75, and then
right?
I decided to.
75% of creatives polled said they were experiencing or close to burnout. That's crazy. So when we add these things together, we look at it and say, okay, post-pandemic, 58% of people say that they have experienced a high level of psychological distress. And that's just people in general. And then you take the quadrant of creative people that is 75% say that they're experiencing burnout or close to burnout. You're talking about the vast majority of creatives out there working that are struggling with some kind of mental health, anxiety, depression, stress level. Why are we doing this? That's the question that I have for you. Why are we even doing this then?
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb, even though I do not have numbers and I'm not a professional. Let's put that in here since we're talking about something serious.
Me too. I don't have numbers either, but I mean, these aren't my numbers. I'm finding them on the internet, so we question.
You're safer than I am.
But
I'm speculating.
It sounds realistic to me, and that's why I asked you for a number first, because we both know a lot of other people in the creative industry, and these numbers don't sound off to me. Okay, now go on. Sorry for interrupting.
No, they don't sound off to me either. No, that's okay. So what I think happens is a couple of things. One, I do think that the industry draws in people who already are prone to that, because that's already been part of the look of it. I mean, even all the way back to Edgar Allan Poe, if we want to talk about way back. I mean, that whole suffering artist thing, I think, is a big part of why they're like, oh, so these are my people, they'll get me, and then I'll just do what they do because that interests me as well. So I think that's part of it.
Okay, let's talk about that one for a second before you go to the other part of it. I think that's a super, super interesting insight, that the people who, if you go back to the traditional artists of the world, you can't tell me that Pablo Picasso, Vincent van Gogh, and Salvador Dali, and we could go down the list, Jackson Pollock, go down the list of artists in history. You can't tell me they didn't have some kind of mental health challenge. There's just no question. Yeah. Van Gogh's like cutting off his ear and sending it to his girlfriend. So these people...
that might not be true, but yeah.
Okay, questionably true. accurate, and
It's
it's an
allegedly.
accurate myth. It's an accurate myth in the world, but questionably true. But even still, looking at his paintings, though, you can't tell me that just from what he output that is true that we can see, there was definitely some struggles inside of him that came out in that expression. And so I think that's a really interesting point that you brought up that I hadn't thought about, that this industry in general caters to people who may have a more prone persona to mental health challenges, emotional health challenges.
And I think it's an attempt to find community. I don't think it's nefarious. I don't think it's a dark thing. I think it's a positive thing. I think people want to be around people they can relate to, because when you do feel bad, especially if you're a minority part of any population, that's harder to find. So of course they do that. Yeah. Of course they want to go where their friends are. That's the entirety of band kids and theater kids in high school. That's why they're there. For that kind of thing.
Hey, don't leave out the artist kids too. The artist kids too.
There's so much. I figured if I got both of those, I got like the Venn diagram.
You get all the same people. They're all the same people. There's some truth to that. Not to stereotype too much about band kids and theater kids, but yeah. I
was both, so I have a card.
I took all the art classes in high school. All my friends, not all my friends, but I was jockey in high school. I was on the swim team and hung out with the swimmers and wrestlers, and that was my friend group outside of school. But inside of school, I was in freaking every art class, and I love my art teacher. I shouted her out in the front of my first book because she had such a big impact on me. And my friends that were in my art classes were such a happy core group of friends where we all felt included, even though we all were coming from different angles of life. And I love that about this creative industry in general, where you do get such a variety of types of people, but we're all built on this one thread of, there's some struggles that we have mentally, emotionally. There's some insecurities that we all have because we put ourselves out there in various ways, and we all feel this same mutual insecurity about being critiqued by others and judged. We feel that together, and that brings a lot of creatives worldwide together in these kinds of things. You see it in conferences when people go to conferences, and it's such a connection, and they're all from all different walks of life and different countries and things. But we all have that common thread.
Yeah. It is a diverse group, which I think is like stimulating too for creative people, because they want to see a lot of differences because it's interesting for them. Yeah. Okay, the second thing that I was going to say.
Okay, what was the other thing? Yeah, second thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is context, the high levels of depression and burnout. That was 75%, you said?
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing there is it's a creative field, but it's completely confined by the need to make money and feed business. And I think the disconnect is so strong that it becomes disillusioning extremely quickly when you're moving from art to design. And that's not an original statement. I've heard that said lots. So that didn't just come from my brain. That comes from a lot of people's brains. But I do think that's part of it, because it's just not fulfilling the way you want it to be. Heck, I've heard some designers say that sometimes they think about going out and learning a literal trade, like plumb, and then art in the evening, but be a plumber during the day, because they feel like that wouldn't be as emotionally harrowing as having to do art and creativity only to make money for a business.
Yeah, that's a challenge. So I can see that too. I think those are both really good insights, that this industry naturally caters to emotionally unstable people. And I can say it because I'm one of them, as I've already talked about, and so is Cyrus, and we've already admitted to that here. So I'm one of you with the emotional instability, and we are naturally drawn to this type of work and industry. And then this other one I think is really interesting, an interesting point too. I think that you do have that battle between wanting to really be an artist, and an artist has a has a customer of one, and it's you. Whether you like it or not, that's the judgment. And if somebody doesn't like your art, well, screw them. It's my art and I made it for me. I didn't make it for you. That's the artist mindset. But the designer is making it for an audience of many. And yes, the audience has to like it, and the audience has to click, and the audience has to call. The audience has to read it, or the art is not effective as a design tool. And so we have that internal battle, which you brought up, Cyrus, which I think is really interesting. We have that internal battle of really wanting to be an artist. We just want to make our stuff and make it look cool and get that creativity out of us. Yeah, but we're stuck in a world where it does have to satisfy the needs of the client and the client's audience. And that internal battle that we feel, I think, is really challenging for a lot of us. And a lot of creatives probably don't even realize it's happening inside them. But that's where some of your frustrations come from.
Yeah. And I think, too, there's also, because you're so tired from doing the design part, you don't have time later. You just don't want to do the creativity for yourself because you've been looking at a screen all day and the last thing you want to do is 3 more hours for yourself before bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
do
you have anything else to add, though?
No, I love that. You have this unfulfilled creativity because you didn't really get to create it the way you really wanted to. You didn't get to express yourself. Like your creative self-expression was not satisfied. But the client's happy and the client's customer's happy, but you're not, because you just sold out. You sold out your creativity to get eyeballs in some fashion.
Selling out every day.
You are. Yeah, you are. Every once in a while, every once in a while you get a project that the client is right and they want you to be creative. The project type is right and it allows you to express yourself inside of the project, and the budget is right. It's paying you enough money that you're happy with the revenue that you're making for it. Every once in a while we get that perfect project, but all the rest of the time, I mean, that's like 1 out of 50 projects, and all the rest of the time you're selling out your creativity for dollars, and there's an emotional battle probably happening in your subconscious because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then to have a bad client who then berates you for it, or you're just not feeling fulfilled by the money on top of all of that, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's hard. Oh man. Okay. Well, we could talk about this. We've already been on for like an hour and 8 minutes. We could talk about this for a long, long time. I think that this conversation needs a follow-up at some point. I would love to do more research on these statistics and find some actual data points that aren't just from one quick search, but do a little bit more deep dive on this mental health, the emotional health, and the creative industry, and why we're feeling all this stuff. So if you're up for it, we can do that sometime in the future as well. Thank you for being on the first episode of What the Hell, Vedika, where we digested mental health and emotional health and the creative industry. It's super fun. Cyrus, thank you for coming on. I'm glad you're here. You have any closing thoughts? Where can people find you?
They can find me at bookery.design. I'm going to be launching my full website soon. I'm currently making a whole new portfolio for a whole new audience. So once that's up, I'm going to be actually available. You'll be able to talk to me. Then
Good.
Where can we find you?
Bookery.design. You can find me at michaeljanda.com and or more Janda on Instagram and YouTube. Those are my 2 primary channels. And let me just shout out real quick too, if you liked this episode and this type of content, please drop a review in your favorite podcast app or a comment on this if you're watching the video version, because that helps other people find this show. We're doing this one. We don't have a sponsor. We're doing this show for free just to give value. And because we love talking about this type of content that hopefully will help people feel not so alone in what they're doing. And let me just close with the very final thing that I do want to reiterate. I'm so glad that I've had the creative career that I've had. And yes, there have been mental health and emotional trauma and roller coasters of emotion, good and bad, but it was so worth it. I'm so grateful for all of those life experiences, because that's what we're here for, really. I mean, at the end of the day, who wants to go through life just doing nothing and having none of those kinds of experiences that mold you and shape you and improve you over time? I certainly had my fair share of shaping and improving experience. I'm glad I had them. And you can fix them all just taking a little antidepressants and some Ambien, and you're good as gold. Good as gold. All right, I shouldn't
Okay,
make
that's not true.
I shouldn't make right. It isn't true, because I take that and I still go to freaking therapy every week and try and unpack my stuff. So yeah, it is not true. That was a false
useful
statement.
tool for plenty of people. It was a lie.
Okay, so let me tell you the thing. When I first got on medication with my first therapist, he said that sometimes we need the medication to stabilize us enough that we can work on the stuff in therapy.
Yeah.
Because if we're so emotionally in torment, then we can't mentally actually do the mental work and emotional work it takes to actually get better. So that's the reality of how I perceive medication.
I agree.
This kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not
that
a
was
fix
good.
everything. That's for sure.
It's not. No. It is. You're not going to be as good. I take that back. Scratch that whole part. That whole part. You're not good as gold if you're on medication. Just makes it so that you can actually function and work on your stuff that you're carrying around.
Yep.
Okay. Cyrus, thank you.
Better.
We will see you again soon. Appreciate you being here.
Yes.
It was super fun.
Yep. I had fun too. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.